friends.
All right.
And it wasn't as bad as everyone said it would be. I got my surgery at like 7 o'clock in the morning, and by 12 noon the same day, I was up and running around and eating solid food.
Oh, wow, okay.
I was lucky. It wasn't. I wasn't even in pain. So.
Okay.
It was
Yeah, I
just,
still have mine somewhere.
just hiding. Yeah, mine were pushing on my other teeth, so that was the neat thing.
I might need them next time. I might be like, I'm starving.
Oh, yeah. My dentist always said
We start talking about
Yeah.
all right.
Spent a lot of time with the guys at home, yeah.
I was yeah, so he was like, I'm not that guy. I was like, I won't
All right, welcome back.
I like to write.
Let's start by reviewing our previous logic puzzle. If anyone remembers anything at all about it, which was a long time ago.
We did. I remember we did.
Why is that? So let's hear the reasoning.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna
Yeah, you say Thursday, you explain.
Well, the Lions have improved on every other day, or all the days except Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So as soon as you sign the proof, it would be Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And then the unicorn lies on Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. So if it would be Thursday because that would mean the Lions saying yesterday was on Monday, which would be Wednesday, which is true. And the unicorn saying that Wednesday was one of his lying days too would be a lie. Therefore, it would be Thursday because he's lying.
And so, I mean, that is correct, but you have to eliminate all the other possibilities as well, right? As you have just explained why Thursday would work, which is a good idea because you need to know that it would work. We have to also make sure that nothing else would work, so you need to identify the day, right? So, let's look at the other half of it, right? So we did basically a circle, right? So we got Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday. Yeah, that's right. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, right? And so, for the lies, he lies Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So, what days would we possibly say that yesterday was one of the lies? So he's lying on these days, right? So what did he say yesterday was one of my lies? You can say it on Thursday, right? Because yesterday was his lying day, and it would be true if he's telling the truth. But on Friday he can't tell it because he has to tell the truth, and it will be a lie. Because Thursday is not one of the lies. If you can say it on Thursday, what other day can you say it? You can also say it on Monday, right? Because this is when he's lying. And when he says it on Monday, if there was one more lying day, he's lying. Right? So you can say it on Monday, you can say it on Thursday, but any of the other days, you cannot possibly say it. Right? Because either he will be telling the truth, he has to lie, or he will be lying, he has to tell the truth. Right? Make sense? So it'll be Monday or Thursday. So far, so good. Now we'll look at the other guy, the unicorn, right? He lies on Thursday, Fridays, and Saturdays. So that would be. So when can he say yesterday was one of my lies? Right? You can say it on Sunday, right? Because it would be true that yesterday was the lying day. And you can also say it on Thursday, because then it would be false and you're lying. Right? So that means that for the lion we have Monday or Thursday, and for the unicorn we have Thursday or Sunday. So what is the day that they both can say it? Well, it's obviously
Is the answer was Wednesday or Thursday? Because you asked what day was it, not what day was it.
You know, I mean, it doesn't matter if you identify the day, but I think I recall saying that the question is what day was it that we talked about. But you know, at any rate, yeah, if we say what day was it yesterday, then it would be Wednesday. What day was it that they said these things? Okay, makes sense? Yeah, it's Thursday because the question is supposed to be what day was it that they said it, right? I mean, as long as we know why, you know, what the reason is, it doesn't matter if it's Thursday or Wednesday, it's all the document, right? Sounds like you can right? Okay, any other questions? What day is it? All right, so let's look at a variant of this problem. No. I mean, you are missing information. Which one is which? But there is sufficient information to figure it out. I mean, yeah, these are the same characters as before, so one of them lies on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. So we're ready to go? All right, I guess we'll discuss this next class. You guys can think about it. Okay, so last time we discussed some issues with financial decision making, right? And we talked about how to figure out which stream of cash flows is worse for us to pay out, right? That is the basic idea, right? If we're deciding, do I want to do this or do I want to do that, we can basically try to compare which one do we not want to do more, right? That's what we did, right? We had a stream of cash flows for the purchase of a car and a stream of cash flows for the leasing of a car, right? And we're trying to figure out which one would be a financially better decision for us, right? This approach really works for anything, and you guys had, we can talk about it for housing, we can talk about it for all kinds of different alternatives. This is a basic idea, right? But the important key was that the timing of the cash flows matters, and that the alternative investment rate also matters, right? because it makes a difference what else you can do with your money, where else you can put it in, so that if you don't spend it on this, what are you going to do with it, right? So I trust you guys all had a good time playing around with the used versus new purchasing decision. Yes, or decent time, an interesting time. At least something like that, right? So that was, that. So I hope you got, got a better feeling for how you would actually use this tool to make your decision. Right now, it's not necessarily the case that you always have all the numbers for everything. Right? Maybe in the new versus used decision that you have to look at, it's hard to ascribe the value to sort of this, intangible feeling of getting like a new car, right? But at least you can say, once you run the numbers, you can say, is this feeling of getting a new car worth it to me? An extra $2,000, right? Because if you see that, at the end of 5 years, the difference in your wealth is, say, $2,000, $5,000, $10,000, whatever you found, then you can start to see, is this worth it that much to me, right? Before you run the numbers, you have no idea how, what would be the decision threshold, how much it is worth to you, right? But now that you have the numbers, you actually have, something to think about. You have to figure out how, the dollar difference, and then it is up to you to figure out if the intangibles are worth that dollar difference, right? So that's not to say that you should ignore intangibles if you cannot put a dollar value, right? It's not the case, because intangibles are important. Now, there are a lot of intangibles and various, personal feeling type things, but you need to figure out how much are those intangibles worth to you, right? That's very important. Otherwise, you could be, blowing a whole lot of money on something that isn't actually worth that much to you, right? So it is important to figure out what the numbers are saying. We're probably going to review this used versus new purchasing decision next week. I'm going to take a look at some of your spreadsheet submissions for the homework, and maybe pick out a few, and we'll discuss how it turned out. Right? So, if you did a particularly thorough job in analyzing your particular decision, then maybe we'll use your spreadsheet as an example. Now, in the meantime, let us go on and talk some more about loans and payments and things like that. Now, for the homework, remember I asked you to just use a loan payment calculator, right? Because we haven't really discussed how, given the size of the loan and the interest rate of the loan and the maturity of the loan, how do you figure out what your payment will be, right? And really, for the most part, most people will say, well, if you use this payment calculator, you have no idea why that is, and whether it is correct. Right? Maybe the calculator has a bug and he's giving them an extra $100 payment. Right? How do you know if it's correct? So we're going to talk about, what we're going to talk about today is how to deal with fixed interest rate loans and how to figure out loan payments and all that. Right? We already have a little bit of basis to work with because we discussed the idea of the time value of money. Right? You guys recall that? We talked about value, present value, and the trade-off between them, right? How, if we have $100 being promised to us in 1 year, it is less valuable to us than $100 right now, right? And the simple reason is that if we had $100 right now, we could at least put in some investment and get more by the end of the year. We would have to wait for $100 right? So the same idea applies essentially from the point of view of loan payment. Right, somebody's giving you money right now. They give you like a big chunk of change right now. In exchange, you say, I'm going to give you a stream of future payments. Right? So maybe if you're taking out a car loan, you're saying, I'm going to take out $10,000 for a car loan. And somebody's giving you $10,000 right now. Right? And then you say, okay, in exchange for the next 3 years, I'm going to pay you some amount of monthly payment, right? So we have times 0 equals 10,000 and 436. You're saying, I'm going to give you some payments every month for the next 36 months, right? And C stands for and the C is some cash flow payment at 0 cost. And so the question is, how much does this C have to be? How much does this C have to be in order to make it worth it to the guy to give you $10,000 right now? Right? Well, let's just get away from this for a second and do some slightly simpler math, right? Let's imagine somebody is loaning you $2,000 right now, right? So right now I'm going to give you $2,000 right now, 0. And you're promising to make me 2 equal-sized payments over the next 2 years, right? So let's imagine that you go up to the guy and you say, okay, give me $2,000 right now. In exchange, I'm going to give you 1,000 in year 1 and 1,000 in year 2. Do you think he'll say, okay? And why is that? Why not?
It's not really anything like that. Like it's not like beneficial to me at all.
You might as well just keep his 2,000, right?
Yeah.
Why would you give it to you in exchange for getting it back later? Right? So you have to give him something more than just 2,000 divided by however many payments, right? Because we have to make it worth his while to give us the $2,000. So you must say how much must I give this guy in order to make it worth his while? And essentially it's a negotiation process, right? It's a bargaining process. And eventually we'll come up with some payment amount that you have to give him over the 2 years that he agrees to give you $2,000. And we'll probably be giving more than $1,000, right? Because he's going to be able to right? So how would you figure out? Let's say you are the guy that's thinking of moving this way. And you're saying, how would I figure out how much of the payment I would like to demand in exchange for my $2,000 right now? Right? So first of all, let's get the let's extract the rate from default rate. Let's assume that you're 100% certain that if you give me $2,000, I will pay you back as promised, based on whatever schedule it is. So you don't have to worry about like you get me $2,000 and going to Vegas and putting it all in there. Right? Let's imagine like you trust us, I already paid. So then you're saying, so how would you decide how much of the payment you want to demand for your $2,000? Yeah. Exactly. That's precisely. You're going to look at the next best investment alternative, right? Of similar distance, right? So since I mentioned the word extrapolation default rate. So you could say, okay, let me just look at what else I can get without taking on any risk, right? And so maybe for your $2,000 over the next 2 years, the best risk-free alternative you can possibly get could be, say, I don't know, a CD in the bank, right? And if you go and put your $2,000 in the bank CD, or if you put your $2,000 in a Treasury I bonds, which we talked about last time, which one today? 127. So not often, but better than you right? So you say, okay, my best alternative is if I take my $2,000 and I put it in at 1.76% interest rate in the I bond, right? So if I do that, if that's my next best alternative, how much am I going to require the guy to pay? What are we going to do? Right? So what do you think would be your thought process to try to figure out how much these things are worth to you, given that your next best alternative is, 1.7. Round it. Sort of, but not quite. Right? Because you have to wait for this one for only 1 year. So you're only getting 1 year in order to keep it. Whereas for this one, you have to wait for 2 years. So you're getting a 2 year. Right? So each thing is not of equal status. Right? So this one happens to be less valuable to you than this one. Right? So let's just take each of these things in isolation. Right? You're going to say, so this is one value of not 1,000, but I'm doing 2 times. Right?
Are we still paying the same amount for both years?
Yes, we're assuming that it's going to be a fixed size payment. Like how many different years. And the reason we're assuming that is because most consumer loans, like you talk about mortgages, you talk about car loans, personal loans, or buying other stuff, they're structured so that you pay a fixed payment every year, usually this month, right? So, I mean, that's the reason. It doesn't have to be that way, right? You can say, I'm going to borrow this money and I'll pay you $100 tomorrow, and then I have another $500. All right? But I mean, that's, well, practically speaking, loans are structured to give you a fixed payment, right? Okay, so we'll say, okay, so one thing I want to know is how much is the first payment worth to me right now? Right? Well, I'm going to say, what am I going to do? Right? How would I secure the payment in 1 year from now if I were investing some money today at 2%? Right? So you would say, okay, the first payment, now I would put in some amount today, right? I'm going to put in some amount today, about $12. I'm going to invest it in at 2%, so it will grow about for 1 year at 2%, right? And it has to produce this cash flow, right? So in other words, in terms of how much money you put in today, in order to produce this cash flow payment, using my alternative investment, right, it would have to be this fast. Right? Because if I put this into my next best alternative, it goes to 2% and produces my payment in 1 year. So I can figure out how much it is worth to do today by solving for x, right? And that would be the 2 divided by 1.8. Right? So for example, if it were the case that C says, $1,000, we will figure out that you need to put in today approximately $980 in order for it to grow to 1,000 in 1 year. Right? Any questions so far? Yeah.
What's the compensation?
Well, I mean, we're saying the next best alternative is 2%, right? So, whatever inflation is, the best thing I can do with my money is get 2%. Right? So if inflation happens to be less than 2%, then I'm making positive return. If inflation happens to be more than 2%, I'm making negative return. But it's still the best thing I can do with my money. Right? Better than 0, right? So, I mean, as it happens, probably 2% is okay? So then I said, okay, so this first payment of whatever amount is worth to me this amount of money today. It would be whatever it is. When you say, how much money do I need to put in today in order to generate a payment of fee in 2 years? Well, you say, okay, I'm going to put in some amount of money, right? We're going to put in some amount of money of X2. Put it in at 2%. So it will grow at 2% for the first year, and another 2% for the second year. And it will produce the expected cash flow I use in 3 years. Alright, so we're going to grow by 2%, increase this cash flow by 2%, we're going to increase it by 2% again, and we'll produce the cash flow. So how much do I need to put in today in order to produce this cash flow in 2 years? Well, that. Now that we can now run into today. So then using my next best alternative in order to produce 2 cash flows in the future, I can figure out how much they are, whatever these cash flows are, I can figure out how much they're worth for me today. Right? So then what happens is that the payments that I will require from the guy will be such that the amount of money I need to put in today to produce them using my next best alternative will be exactly $2,000. Right? So that way, the deal that I'm getting from the guy is no worse than what I could do elsewhere. Yeah.
The 1.2 square, would that give you the amount, like the total amount owed after 2 years, or just for the second year?
Now we're just looking at this one second thing. Right? We're just saying how much I need to put in to produce this one second thing in 2 years. Right? So for example, we could say, all right, let's imagine that this guy is promising to pay us, $1,010 every year, right? So if you know that 1,000 is too small, right? So if you pay this $1,000 per year, you only get a total of 2,000, and that's a cash deal for the number of $1,000 per year, right? So let's imagine that the guy comes to us and says, you know what? I know $1,000 is little, so I'll make you a deal. I'll give you $1,010 every year for the next 2 years. In exchange for your $2,000 loan today. How about that? Is it a deal, buddy? He asks me, what did you say? Or you say, so here is my alternative that says, I'm going to put in $2,000 today, and then in 1 year I will receive $1,000 again. And in another year, I receive another $1,000. Now, what can I produce with my $2,000 if I don't take this deal and go to my next best alternative? Right? So what's going to, what? So it's okay, but in my next best alternative, how much money do I need to put in at 2% in order to produce my first 1,000 points? Right? Well, that would be X1, that would be 2,010 divided by 1.02, right? So my amount is my initial investment is going to grow by 2% to produce 1,000 points. So how much does it have to be? Something about 320 points. Okay.
990.19.
Right, so that would be 990.99. Right, then you say, okay, so this is how much I need to put into my next best alternative to produce the first $1,010. How much do I need to put in to produce the second $1,010? Assuming I get my 60%. Well, our X2 is going to be 1,010 divided by 1.02. Right? By 70 what? Okay? Alright, so if I use my next best alternative instead of this guy alone, I use my other alternative, reduce these payments and these quantities, right? How much would I need to put in? It would be 99 plus 970. Right? It is going to be 1,960. Right? Because some of these things So here is your decision now. Do you want to put in $2,000 in order to produce these two payments in the next 2 years? Or would you rather put in $1960 in order to produce the same two payments over the next 2 years? And then you spend the other $20 on sushi. All right, that's right. Who can say no to sushi, right? Make sense? So if we can get 2% in the other investment, right? We just calculate that we can put in 1960, and then we'll produce $1,010 in 1 year we can take out and go like 500, right? And then in another year we'll be able to get another $1,010 and go spend something else.
It's like the investment if you put it in the
Yeah, so if we take our 1960 and put it into our, say, CD or I bond at these 2%, then we'd be able to extract these two payments out of it.
So like at the end of the year, you would have $2,020?
Well, plus what, I mean, assuming we don't spend this, we might invest it also. Like we're assuming we're getting these payments and we're spending them. But yeah, so we'd be able to get this payment and this payment, so the total we extract would be 2020. Now, from the loan, like the guy is asking for a loan of $2,000. Just give me $2,000 and I'll give you these payments. So your question is, do I want to pay $2,000 to get these payments? Or do I want to pay $1,960 to get the same payments?
Okay, so you would charge them like $1960.
So if you want the same deal, you say, I'm not going to give you $2,000. I'll only give you $1,960. Right?
Okay.
Or if you said, you would say, if you really want exactly 2,000, you have to give me something more than this, right? Because I can go elsewhere and get this only for 1960. I'm not going to buy these payments from you in 2,000, then I can go somewhere else and buy them for 1960. Right? Any questions? Any other questions? Making sense? So how do you figure that out, right? You need to set this up so that, 2,000, right, is equal to the cash flow divided by 1.03 plus the cash flow divided by 1.03 squared. Right? That needs to be the case in order for you to be willing to give them exactly $2,000. Right? So can we solve for this cash flow? Yes, that's the estimate. Right? And so you can see that the same, now before we do that, the basic idea is if we have a stream of fixed size payments over time, this same approach applies no matter how many periods of payments we have. As we said, I promise you payments over 10 years. They would say, the value of the first one to us is divided by 1 plus the rate of the first hour, second one, 1 plus the rate of the second, and so on and so forth, right? Because in order to produce a payment in any future year, we're going to put in some money and let it grow by that many years until we get there. Right? Make sense? And so if you know that the effective rate of interest that you want to receive on the loan is some rate, right? We say, okay, how much am I going to be willing to lend you given these payments? To find the value of each of the payments discounted by the rate. Or if you want to know what must be the payments if I'm going to lend you $10,000. And you set this up and you solve for what the payment must be in order for the value to come out to be $10,000. Right? Make sense? Any questions? You're fine with that? Okay. So, just to continue along with this example for a little bit, let's figure out what must be the payment in every year for the next few years in order for us to be willing to give this guy $2,000. You got it? All right. So you have to do 20, 30, 10, 30, right? So if we wanted, first of all, for this particular case, how do we find that? Usually as you fiddle around with the equation until you solve for C. Now I think really the most straightforward thing to do is to factor out the C and then divide out by the total quantity. But making numbers clearer by multiplying over the squared in the denominators works as well, right? As long as we don't make any errors in making the operations. Right? But that's probably factor out the C and that's 2,000, and then 2,000 divided by all of that gives us 15, right? But either way, we should come out with 1030.10. And you can verify, right, that if you put in $2,000 today at 2%, you will be able to extract exactly these things, and nothing unique, right? And in fact, let's give that a try. So what happens? Let's say we put in $2,000 today at a 2% interest rate. So we let it sit for 1 year. How much is it going to grow to? So we put in 2,000 at 2% interest rate for the course of the year. How much will it grow to? 24, right? 2% more than 2,000, right? So it will become 24. So you say, okay, it's time for me to take out my first payment and go blow it in double. And I go see whatever it is. I was hoping to do in my first payment, right? So I'm going to take out my 1030, only 10. And so I will end up with 1,009.9, right? So I take my 1030, now my 1,009.90, I'm going to let it rise for another year at 2%. Right? So after another year, what will this turn into? Hopefully, 2030.10. And it should turn into another 1030.10, and you say, it's time for me to take out my second payment and go buy it up. Right? So after the first year, you put it down to 2,000, it grows at 2%, and becomes 24, right? And you say, I'm going to receive my first payment of 1030. You take that out, and it will remain the 1,009.90 sitting in your investment at 2%. So now this investment will grow again by 2% in the second year. Right, 1,009.90 growing at 2% for 1 year is going to produce 30%. Right? So this is right. So this is the idea, right? We can figure out how much we require to evaluate the payment if we know what our next best alternative is, right? Or given that we're able to pay a certain amount of payment, we can figure out how much we're going to pay and not get a crappier deal than we get elsewhere. Right? Make sense? Anyone have any questions? Okay. So the basic idea is that if we're looking at some future cash flows, and I want to know how much are you willing to pay in order to buy the right to receive these cash flows, right? This is basically what a loan is. You give them a loan right now, and in exchange, you're going to receive the cash flows, right? So you're paying some money today in exchange for the right to receive these cash flows, right? So if we know that, we have some free cash flow, we can easily figure out how much we're going to pay for it, assuming we know what invested return we can get in the next best alternative, right? And we can also figure out, if the guy wants some amount of money today, what are the payments that we require from him in order not to get it back? So as a general rule, is the present value of these cash flows, as we know, we talked about, the present value of future value, right? Present value is the value for today, future value is future payment. Now, the present value of a bunch of future cash flows is going to be the sum of the present value of the individual cash flows, right? So I give so there's the sum of each of these individual cash flows discounted by how many years, right? That's sort of how much you can pay today in order to receive that one particular cash flow. I goes from 1 to 2. So in this case, I just have a 36-month loan. We'll have 36 terms, right? So we have the value of each of the 36 future payments aggregated together to figure out how much we're going to raise. Right, there are 36 of them, right? This is the first one, this is the second one. We don't receive a payment at time 0. This is how much we pay to the guy. Right? So we're saying we're receiving 36 of these things. The first one in 1 year. So the value of the first one would be 2 1 plus R to be 1. Right? So we only have one year to go in this year. Right? The second one would be 2 years. So we 2 1 plus R to be 2. And so on and so forth. And then the last one will be 36 years. So we get to go by 36 years. We're looking at the equivalence of a bunch of money today in exchange for a stream of future payments. Right? So assuming that you know that the going rate for this type of investment is R%, $2 now, 5, whatever, then you can talk about risk here. Right? So you decide what rate you want. Then you say, how much am I willing to give you in exchange for these payments? Right? So this is the equivalent of money today and the stream of future payments. Any other questions? Right, so now we can say, okay, now let's imagine I want to borrow $10,000 from a car. Let's imagine that the going rate for a car loan is, for someone with my rate, which is 55 cents for a business car, right, is say 5%. What would have to be the monthly payment on the loan if I'm taking a 3-year loan, right? So, okay, so in order to figure out what this is, I know that the guy who's loaning the money is going to say, okay, if you want me to give you $10,000 and the loan rate is 5%, then I'm going to do this. I'm going to say $10,000 equals the sum of the present values of right? And so he's going to say, what must be the C that will produce a present value of $10,000? And that will be the monthly payment that we'll have to pay. Right? Now, let me mention the details here, right? So here we're talking about a monthly loan, right? So if the loan is a 5% loan as stated in the APR basis, then this means that each month we're going to accrue 1/12 of the 5% annual rate, right? So that means that the value of the first payment that happens in 1 month, right, is going to be C over 1 plus 1/12 of the annual rate, right? So this is the rate per month. Right, and the same thing for the second one, it will be 1 plus 1/12, whatever 5% is, squared, right? So you get to go by that rate for 2. Right, so it is important not to use the whole 5% here, because 5% is the interest rate for the whole year, right? It is not the interest rate per month. So on a monthly basis, we have to accept it. Alright? So now we should be able to figure out if we have a 5% APR car loan of $10,000 for 3 years, what would be our monthly payment? Right, there would be 36 terms in the sum, would kind of be a big pain, but we can figure out exactly what it would be. Right, so for example, like you could probably use a spreadsheet, and that would take us a lot, right, to figure out what this payment might be in order to value of these payments equal to $5,000. Any questions? Okay. So it happens that in the old days, before we had computers and calculators and spreadsheets, doing these sums with a lot of terms. I think for a mortgage, how many of these terms are there? Like if it's a 30-year mortgage? Like a lot. How many? 360, right? That is a lot. So imagine that every time somebody comes in and says, how many, what would be my mortgage payments? If I borrow $200,000. Right? Before we have computers, somebody has to deal with all this stuff. Right? Back in the old days, maybe they'd have a room full of monkeys with slide rules, and they would just throw a math problem into the room and then just throw it out and make it down. Right? It was very inefficient. Right? Monkeys have to be fed, and the slide rules very very necessary. So what happened is that when they went and talked to some mathematicians, and they said, hey, can you find out a better way to figure out, if you can mix this sort of finite series of terms into a closed form mathematical expression. And once the mathematicians started to say closed form expression, they're all excited and work. And then put it in from that. But as it happens, we can actually use the mathematical expression and we can condense this expression into a nice closed form expression. Right? And what we actually find is that the present value of some number of fixed size things happening is expressed in a small short form. Right? So this thing, the sum of all these terms, right? We're going to be how many there are. And we can write this down in a closed form. Like that. And that's exactly the same thing. And now we no longer have, a sequence of 260 or however many terms we have. We have a nice closed form expression for the sum of the two. unless you're particularly interested, in which case, discuss it after class. I'm not going to go through it as to derive how to do that. But it's actually pretty straightforward. Do that. Use this where the class, the finance user, but really trust you that these are the Alright, so now instead of dealing with these sums, we now have this nice expression for doing the whole thing 1 plus 3. But at the end of the day, there's nothing more than just like a rearrangement of the sum. But it's like the sum of a bunch of individual terms. Alright? Underneath that. So now if you say, well, what would be my payment? You just have to solve this equation for C. Right? And you divide out of that and you solve for C. Alright? Or, if I know my fee and my rate, how much loan can I take out? You don't have to solve my terms. You just plug things into the equation and get out of it. Right? So now, we can use this and say, okay, what would be my monthly payment? Right? If I have a $10,000 loan and I have living for 36 months and my interest rate is 5% APR, what would be my payment? Well, now I can use this expression to solve for C, which is my payment. Right? How would I solve for C? By some stuff on both sides, right? And when we do that, we'll have 2 divided by 12 equals C, right? That's all we need to know. Right? So now if we're solving for C here, right? Well, we say C is equal to that. The present value is $10,000. So that is the amount of loan that we want to take out, right? That is the cash that we're using right now. Right? We divide by all the stuff. So 1 minus 1 divided by 1 is 12. And 36 payments, right? 1, 12, 6, and divide by all of them. And divide by 12, 1. And that will produce the result. Right? All we're doing is we're plugging in numbers in the equation. We no longer have to deal with bunch of terms and so on. And so what do we get as a result? Remember exactly? Make sense? Right? As similar, you could say, I can afford, $400 a month for my car. How big of a car loan can I get out? Right? Well, all you need to do is put in 400 over here for the payment, and then you look up what the interest rates are for the car, right? And you decide how long you want to be, and you can figure out how big of a loan you can take out. And so there's a precise mathematical relationship between the payment that you make, the interest rate being charged on the loan, the maturity of the loan, and how big the loan is, right? Once you know 3 of them, you can determine the 4th one exactly, right? So, this, so this formula is handy to have in case you are looking at yourself and scores and details and possibilities and sort of spreadsheets and try to do good things, right? Again, for the most part, if you're doing some one-off thing, you could probably use like a word calculator to do some calculations. It's good to have an actual mathematical expression to play with, so you can explore many different possibilities. Okay, any questions? Okay. Let me do a quick time check. All right, so let's say, we go here to bankrate.com and we get to the loan calculator that we were using for the homework, right? So you can put in any numbers here and it will tell you the payments that you must pay given the size of the loan, the interest rate on the loan, and the length of the loan. Right? I encourage you to give it a try and actually verify that using our approach there to calculate the payments is exactly the payments that we produce using this calculator. Right? For example, in this case, we have the default guys here. The loan amount is $15,000, 4 years, 48-month term, 10% interest. What will be our monthly payment? Right? We could do just what we did over there to calculate the payment. Right? And hypothetically, we should come up with $380 some. Right? And alternatively, if you could say I can pay so many dollars, right? This calculator doesn't actually let us do that, right? To go the other way, I think. I mean, it does, but you can go either which way you want, right? That makes sense? Any questions? Okay. All right. So this is the basic idea. Now, obviously, there are some important relationships that I will mention, right? First of all, I'm going to ask you, right? So, everything else being equal, do you think if you can borrow over the term of 3 years versus you can borrow over the term of 5 years, you what you can pay $500 a month? If you can borrow more money in the longer term or the shorter term? Let me go $500 a month. And then you can go like you go another 40%. So if I can go over 3 years, I can go borrow more or less money if I can pay $500 over 5 years. More than. It's the opposite. And because think of it, right? How do you find how much money you're going to borrow over 3 years? Well, you'll say, okay, I'm paying $500 a month for 36 months, right? How much am I going to borrow? Well, I'll find the value of $500 a month for 36 months and for 30 months. Now, if I do the same over 5 years, what is the 5-year loan going to look like? It's going to be these things plus some more payments at the end of each month. Alright? So let me say, is the value of 36 payments of 5 years more or less than the value of 60 payments? Who died when you do it? Well, obviously, 60 payments of 500 is 36 payments plus some more payments. Alright, so it has to be more valuable. So you get some more money on top of your 36 payments. Alright, so the loan you can get for $500, $500 payment, is going to be more than more payments than going to promise in exchange. Right? Make sense? Alright, so in general, if you have the same payment and you stretch out going to the loan, you should be able to get more money. So if you're willing to say, take out a 3-year loan, you can afford $500. Figure out exactly how much money you can get. Whereas if you say, I'm willing to do this over 5 years, you can get a bigger loan. You can get more dollars. Right? Right? Or if you're talking about 30 years, 20 years, 30 years mortgage. Right? The longer the term of the mortgage, the bigger the house you can get. Everything else you need. Right? Because you're promising more future payments. Right? Make sense? Now another question is, let's imagine that, again, imagine that you make $500 a month payment, and one guy over here says, I'm going to make your loan at 3%. And another guy over here says, I'm making this loan at 5%. So if you're willing to make $500 payment, this guy is willing to give you more money. Why is that?
Because if they're making payments of 500 and if they're giving them 3% instead of 5%, then he's getting more money.
Well, it means that each of your payments is more valuable to the guy with 3% required return, right? Because, when the guy wants 5%, that means he's saying, my next best investment is 5%. So each of these payments that he's promising me is worth whatever the present value is discounted 5%. Right? So I will have to put in less money today to produce these payments. Whereas the guy whose next best alternative is 3%, these payments are more valuable because he has to put in a bigger amount of money today and let it go at 3% to produce those payments. Right? So in general, everything else being equal, the lower the interest rate, the bigger the present value of the payment. Therefore, the bigger the loan you can take, given fixed rate. Or given a fixed loan amount, you can make lower payments if the interest rate is less. Right? Remember, as we said, there's a precise relationship between all of the components in the fixed repayment loan schedule. So if something goes up, something else has to go down. Right? Make sense? Okay. So, now this here is a little picture of a schedule of the present value of $500 at 10% per year for over 30 years. So let me explain what it says, right? So the value of the first $500 that you're expecting to receive in 1 year, right? At 10% interest rate, it's going to be something on the order of $460, right? If you put in $450 or $60 today, it grows at 10%, it becomes $500, right? Make sense? Yes?
This what the loaner is receiving back, or what the person's paying?
Oh,
Or
both.
the same thing?
Right, it's the same thing. But so the first payment, 500, you're saying, at 10% interest rate, that's the next best to spend, it is worth today, say, 460. But if you put in 460 at 10%, you're going to get another $46. It's a little too much, but like somewhere between 450 and 460 is the value of $500 today at 10%. Right? Now, $500 in 2 years is even less valuable, right? Because at the next best 10% rate of return, you have to put in today something on the order of $420 or something, right? And let it grow for 2 years at 10%, and it will become 500, right? And so you can see that, over the life of these payments, we're assuming here 30 years, 10%, every payment is less and less valuable to us from the standpoint of view of today looking into the future, right? So the $500 in 1 year is not so bad, but the $500 that we expect to receive in 30 years is relatively worthless, right? And you can see here, the $500 in 30 years is worth, what is that? $15 or something like that, $20, I don't know, right? We can You can actually calculate it out. What's the value of $500 in 30 years, assuming our net best investment return is 10%? Well, how do you do that? Right, because we're saying how much money do you put in today at 10% interest in order to grow for 30 years to give you 500. Right? So if you start with 5 times 1.1 to 30, and that's you have 500 bucks. Right? So we just solve for 59 dividing by 30. Right? And so you can, by similar token, you can find each one, the value of each one of these payments at 10%. Right, now the value of the loan, if we're saying I will take out a loan at 10% in exchange for $500 a year monthly yearly payments, right? It's going to be the sum of all of these values, right? So, that's summation right there, right? The present value of the loan payment is this, right? There's the sum of the values of each of these future payments. Right, so there's one in 1 year, there's one in 3 years, there's whatever the last one in 30 years. You add them all together, right? That'll be how much money you can borrow given those terms today. Right? Make sense? Any questions? Okay. Now you can see this looks very similar to our graphs of future retirement account values as well, right? It's basically an exponential growth curve. Only when we're looking at future values, the earlier payments, we're growing by more periods and becoming more valuable. When we're looking at present value, the earlier payments are more valuable because they don't shrink as much, right? So the future payments shrink by a lot more, right? Because we're thinking how much do we need to invest today to get to there. And we're getting the same exponential growth. Okay. So this is the basic idea. I do encourage you to go back and play around with this fixed repayment loan type idea and think about some hypothetical loan like mortgages, car loans. Some capital purchase loan, whatever, and see how things work out and get comfortable with this idea. Maybe use a spreadsheet and fill down a bunch of rows for your present values and compare with what happens when you use the closed form solution to make sure you're doing it right. Right, and of course I'll throw you some homework problems to do that. Okay. Now. So this was my talk about loan amortization. Or the reason it's called amortization is because essentially spread it out over a number of years, right? Now to go back to the housing and mortgage thing, one of the most popular type of mortgage is the fixed rate, fixed term mortgage, right? And so that's going to be using these ideas that we just talked about, right? You take out a $200,000 mortgage, there is some kind of an interest rate on that is fixed. You can figure out what will be the monthly mortgage payments using exactly those equations right there, right? Or if you can say, I can afford to pay $1,000 a month, how big of a loan can I take out? Figure out exactly how big of a loan you can take out, right? Fixed rate mortgages are popular because they give you a lot of certainty as to what your cash outflows are going to be, right? It's nice to know that for the next 30 years you're going to hang out in your house and your mortgage payments are going to be exactly what they are today and tomorrow and in 5 years and in 10 years, right? It's a pretty attractive feature. But there are also adjustable rate mortgages. And those are mortgages wherein instead of giving you a fixed rate, the interest rate on the mortgage is adjusted every 6 months or sometimes a year, depending on the term. Right? Because as we discussed before, interest rates in the marketplace fluctuate over time. Right? So basically they depend on the supply and demand for funding. Right? When there's a lot of demand for funding, interest rates rise, right? As businesses finance expansion and whatever. Right? When the economy is not doing so well, there's not so much demand for funding and interest rates drop. Now this is somewhat confused or confounded by the government interfering with interest rates and trying to play around with the public schemes of the economy, trying to even things out. But generally that's the idea, right? So interest rates change. So if like for example right now, you go out there and you say, I want to take out a 30-year mortgage in a house, your interest rate you will pay as a fixed 30-year interest rate is about 3.5%. Right? You can actually go to the bank rate and see mortgage interest rate now 3.5%. All right, now why is it 3.5%? Right, we know that right now we're in a historically low interest rate environment. You would think, hey, the guys who are giving the mortgages, are they stupid or something, right? What happens is like in 5 years interest rates go up, but my mortgage is fixed rate, and they're still getting 3.5%. Kind of sucks for them, right? Well, there are a lot of factors involved, and by the sound of your gathering stuff, I figure we're almost out of time. But the idea is that the fixed rate mortgage is set with some expectation of future rate changes. An adjustable rate mortgage is set with whatever the current rate is. So in fact, if you were to get an adjustable rate mortgage right now, you would be paying an even lower interest rate than 3.5%. Right? Because that rate doesn't have to build in room for error for future rises, because the interest rate will be changed when it changes. It's an adjustable rate mortgage. So we'll continue discussion next week. I hope you all had a good time, and we'll go from there.